This time we're talking about self-editing strategies for revising your manuscript.
My name is Eva Barrows. I am a freelance editor and writer. I do developmental editing for fiction and nonfiction books. I also enjoy doing the publication management for newsletters, and I do content writing and editing for blogs, articles, and websites.
And my name is Lila, and my business is LaBine Editorial. I offer line editing and copy editing for fiction. I do beta reading for specific fiction genres, and then I also edit and proofread screenplays. Okay, so let's talk self-editing. Do I need to work? Oh, I'm sorry. Do I need to self-edit if I'm going to work with an editor? I get asked this, and the next slide, I get asked the same question. Yes, and everyone should be doing some sort of self-editing. So even if you're going to hire an editor, you want to get your manuscript as close to perfect to you as possible. And that way your editor sees it, hopefully, as you want it to be seen, and then they can just help you improve it. If you don't do any self-editing, then your editor may not see it as you want it to be seen or understand your project as well, and then their work isn't going to be as effective. And then the other question I hear is, do I need to hire an editor if I'm self-editing? And yes, most likely you will. Someone who's reading your manuscript for the first, second, or even third time is going to be able to see things and find issues that you won't be able to see because you'll have been looking at it for 100+ times. So yeah, they'll just be looking at it with fresher eyes, and they'll be able to find things that you can't see. And then, of course, there's the you don't know what you don't know. So before I became a copy editor, and I thought about becoming a copy editor, I thought, before I took the classes, I thought, oh yeah, I can do that. Definitely. I can find typos. But then when you take the courses, you realize, oh man, there's so much that I didn't know. So a professional editor will always be able to find things and know about things that maybe you, as a writer, don't know about yet. And then Eva's going to talk about story level self-editing.
Yep. So first off, I just want to talk a little bit about the writing process. So for writing, the act of writing is you want to get everything down first. And it's very hard to not edit as you go. So I am very guilty of writing a little bit and then starting to edit. But no, that is it's not good for your writing flow to keep stopping and going over things. So just some common tips for keeping in the flow would be to write the first draft or your idea draft by hand on paper. And this is just, jotting down the bones of your story. And then when you type that up, and then you're going to make it much better as you're going over it again, that's actually an edited second draft because you took something that was very rough and then by magic, it happened. It got better when you typed it up. And then you probably already know this, but if there's like details and facts that you don't know at the point when you're writing, you can use a placeholder like XX or just some little thing in your manuscript to let you know that you need to come back and fill in those blanks later. And then to just write down everything that comes to your mind and keep the writing momentum going. So you're just trying not to stop, even though you might not want that in your final piece. Just go ahead and write it down, and you may use it and incorporate it somewhere. So after you get that draft down, this is the time to start sculpting. So you'll go back and fill in the placeholder text, and you'll chisel out the extra content. So this is the point where maybe you knew that you would have to do more research, or you knew that maybe not everything was going to make it, but this is when you would start cutting away and slimming down your manuscript. So um, a good idea is to try to see your work in a different way. So you can look at it on an e-reader, or you can print it out and kind of just physically, make deletions and make notes about where you want to move things and what you want to take out. And just keep in mind, you're going to be doing many, many waves of revision. So this is just one of the first waves of kind of just clearing up the clutter, and just let yourself relax, because it's very hard to do everything all at once. So you'll start with the big issues first, and you'll come back and do additional waves of edits. And we'll talk about some of those waves. So how would you identify issues and problems in your writing? So when your first full draft is complete, it's a great idea to let it rest a few days or a week or two, and then come back with fresh eyes, and you'll immediately start asking yourself, what the heck was I trying to say here? And then this is great because you're noticing where the issues are. So just go ahead and try to revise what you're noticing yourself. And then after you have taken your draft as far as you can, then you can find outside readers like a critique group or a friend to provide additional feedback. And you would want to know what confuses them as a reader, and what questions are they having, and then do another round to answer those questions. So self-editing process for fiction and nonfiction. So both fiction and nonfiction, you want to start with reading the full draft without making any edits. So you'll take notes on a separate piece of paper about what's not working, and maybe make little notations about where you would come back within the margins. So you're going to pay attention to the strengths and the weakness of the piece, and then keep asking yourself, can the reader, or will the reader be able to see the picture of the story that you had in mind when you were writing it? So whatever's going on in your head, has it translated onto the page? And then the second thing for both fiction and nonfiction is creating an editing plan. So you would focus on what you need to do to make the story message clear for readers. And then I'll just talk a little bit about how you would go about doing that. So for nonfiction, what you're going to address during editing, the big picture level, is just ensuring that the chapters are in a logical order. So this is if you're writing a book, you want to make sure the message and purpose of your book is being kind of solidified by the order of the chapters. Similarly, you're making sure that your details are in order when you're writing an article or a blog post, and to back up your argument, and that your ideas are presented logically. And then on a chapter level, so on each chapter, you want to use topic relevant, personal, and researched examples in each chapter. So just make sure everything that's in your chapter is on the topic and it's not going off on a tangent. So you want to pick a consistent, fun, and engaging tone, and make sure that's consistent throughout your full piece. And then identify and cut unnecessary chapters and extra content within chapters. I've found some people, or an author that I've worked with, had a chapter within a chapter. So you kind of make sure that the chapter flow isn't being broken up by something else that could be a chapter on its own. So you're going to ensure the clarity of ideas, examples, and quotes used to prove your points. So just make sure, again, that everything is there for a reason. And then if you're including questions or exercises for the readers, just make sure that those exercises are on topic, and will really help your reader understand, whatever the point is of your chapter. So fiction, there's a there's a lot more that you would need to look into for fiction. And then if you are let's see, there's a plotter and there's a pantser. So if you just wrote your book and you didn't do any plotting, this is the time that you're going to do the plotting. And then also if you did plotting, you're just kind of double checking that you hit all of the points that you need to hit to create your story. And so I'm going to talk about the main plot points to hit. And then later on, I'll talk about like how you identify them. So these are just the things that you need to make sure are in your story. So in the beginning of the story, there's a point of no return, or it's also called an inciting incident. And this is what causes the main character to take action, and it really kicks off the momentum of the story. So that needs to be there. And then after that, you're going to introduce the new world because of the inciting incident, things have changed. So now you're going to kind of present that to your reader. And then towards the middle of your book, there's a midpoint called rededication. And this is where the main character chooses to take action to achieve their goal. And then towards the end of the book, there's the dark night or crisis. So this is when the character thinks that they might not achieve their goal, things are falling apart. And then at the very end, there's the triumph or climax. And this is when the character has changed after they've survived those challenges that you threw at them. And they are achieving an inner and outer reward. And they get something out of having gone through the story. And yeah, so just making sure that all these points are hit. And then if you're writing a genre, like a romance or a sci-fi or a Western romance, you need to make sure that all the genre beats are hit. So this is what makes the story a romance is there has to be a meet cute where the man and woman meet. And there's a bunch of other different points that need to be in a story to make it that genre. So there's just a couple of resources here. The Story Grid by Sean Coyne. And I really recommend recommend their website, storygrid.com. What is it? /content-genre. This is where you can look up your genre and then just make sure that all the points are within your story. And then another book for genre is The Anatomy of Genres by John Truby. Yeah, so the one way to ensure that the beats for your genre are there. Oh, one way to ensure the beats for your genre, that there is a complete story arc to your plot. Okay, so now we're going to get into that. So, whoa, this is scary, right? What is this spreadsheet? So this is a scene level editing tool. So you would map your scenes on a grid to ensure the necessary beats are included. So just all that stuff I was just talking about, this is where you're going to list it out and make sure that it is in your book. So basically there's about 20 different things here that you can check off, but let's move ahead and I'll come back to this. So we're going to dissect a scene real quickly. So there's character development and plot action. So this is what we're looking at: character development and plot action, and then all those beats that we were just talking about. So we're going to identify and track the main action of each scene. So this is very important. You want to make sure each scene has a main action. So for our scene, Sally works on a painting for the art fair. That is what the scene is about. So what happens in the scene? Sally is interrupted by Bert when she's painting. Okay, Bert is annoying and he's interrupted her. So what is the consequence? Sally's painting, okay, the consequence of Bert coming along is Sally's painting might not dry in time for the art fair. So we're going to note the character change from the start to the end of the scene. So Sally is happily painting, she's serene, but by the end of the scene, she lashes out at Bert and loses her creative flow. So now she's frustrated and upset. So Sally has a goal of finishing the painting. Sally's internal desire is to achieve acclaim at the art fair. Um, Sally has changed both internally and externally from the start of the scene to the end. So we can see that she was, serene, and now she's frustrated. And then externally, you can see, how her demeanor has changed. And let's go on to the next slide. So this is story tracking the scene. So the most important parts are, I feel like this is the most basic parts of that story grid that we saw the full 20 columns of. So first, you just note the chapter. So we'll say this is in chapter 3, and this is the second scene. And then that scene is 1,500 words. So you want to track the word count, because then you can see how your scenes vary in length. So you might, if they're really wildly different, from small to large, the pacing might be off. So that's why word count would be important to look at. And the story event, so Sally works on a painting, and then we note the emotional change, that's serene to frustrated. And then polarity shift would be in the beginning of the scene, she's positive, she's happy. By the end of the scene, she's mad, she's negative. So, and then there's the turning point or so the turning point is going to be a realization or action of the main character. So realization, Sally's art might not be dry in time for the art fair, so she might not get her goal of acclaim. And then I just wanted to say that the emotional change and the polarity shift, they speak to tension and character development. So you can sense that this is a simple scene, but there is tension there because the character is going through something. And then you want to note your polarity shift because you want to make sure there's movement happening, emotional movement happening. And then the part with the story event, that's where you're going to see for each scene what's going on, and then that's where you'll figure out if that's a major plot point that we talked about earlier, or if that was a genre beat. Not all of the story events are going to be one of those, but you need to make sure that they're there, and that's where you're going to track it. That's it. And then this is just quickly other things to look for when you're editing. This is the story level. You want to streamline characters and cut unnecessary characters. So I was working on a piece myself, and I found out that there's 2 characters kind of very similar. So I'm going to morph them into one character. And then look for large chunks of dialogue. And that's just one character talking, talking, talking. This is kind of like an info dump. They're just talking and giving you backstory and history, and you might not need that. And then, so really when you're doing dialogue, you want it to be short, if you can, and just kind of natural. And then you would get the needed backstory can come through, that short dialogue and interaction with people or characters and narration. And then just on a need to know basis. And then build sensory detail. So make sure your reader can feel and see your scenes. So that's when you're adding sensory detail to what the characters are feeling. And I think I'm done for now.
Okay, I'm going to talk about sentence or paragraph level self-editing, and it's, to me, not quite as exciting as story level editing. So I'm going to kind of run through this briefly and not give a lot of detail, because I don't know if you all want to sit and learn about dangling modifiers or where commas go and not. But I'm also going to be sending an email to you in the next couple of days with a list of like links and other resources that you can look at. So just know, if you don't understand something that I briefly mention, you can always ask me, or I'll give you, you'll get that email with the resources. Okay, so when you do more detailed self-editing, you're mostly working on trying to get rid of things that are going to distract your readers from the story. So all of these things: check for point of view issues. You're going to improve your dialogue, action beats, verbs, fact check, ensure consistency, reduce repetition, check word usage and sentence structure, and then clean it all up. And of course, your copy editor will do all of this as well. But like I said earlier, the more you can do now, the more your editor can do the stuff that maybe you didn't know about, or can work on the stuff that you didn't see. So when you check for point of view issues, you want to make sure it's easy for a reader to identify when a point of view character has changed, which is usually, if you have more than one point of view character, it will change between scenes or chapters. But you want to make it clear to the reader that that's what's happened, so they're not confused. And then your point of view character shouldn't know more than what they should. So if I'm the point of view character, I'm not going to be able to know what's happening in the room behind me. And so the reader also shouldn't know, unless it's like an omniscient third person point of view. But even then, you have to do it a certain way. So you want to be really careful and make sure that your character doesn't know more, and therefore your reader doesn't get more info than they should. And make sure your point of view stays consistent. So if you are doing omniscient, you need to follow the rules for omniscient point of view. If you're doing first person, you follow the rules for first person point of view. And if it's close or deep point of view, which means the reader is going to be really inside that point of view character's head, so the narration then is going to be used in language that the point of view character would use. So if that character speaks really formally, then the narration is going to sound that way as well. And then when you improve dialogue, you're making sure that it sounds natural, that it sounds like that character, that you're using dialogue tags appropriately, and you're punctuating the dialogue correctly. When you're looking at your action beats, you're making sure that you've used the right amount of action beats or description that will either slow the scene down if you want to do that, or speed the scene up if you want it to move more quickly. And your action beats need to help your readers see the conversation in their head, just like Eva was saying. So you don't want it just be like two heads talk. That's called the talking head syndrome. You want to be able to picture where the characters are having their conversation, little things that they're doing, like picking up their cup or, smiling or whatever. So you want to add those in, and that gives context and it helps readers visualize. Do the action beats reflect the characters' personalities? So maybe one character leans more on the nervous side or anxious side, so she might fidget more, or I don't know. There's so many different things, but you just want to make sure that your action beats reflect those personality traits. And then make sure that you punctuate them correctly, because lots of people confuse dialogue tags with action beats, and action beats are their own full sentence. So they're going to be punctuated accordingly. And then when you look at your verbs, you want to make sure that they're strong and specific. So often when you have an ly adverb like she walked toward him slowly, or she walked toward him quickly. You could say, she rushed. So that verb rushed is more specific than walked. And then you can get rid of that adverb. It also just stronger verbs make your sentences like they're more entertaining. And then make sure your verb tense is consistent. You especially have to be careful of this when you're writing in present tense, because our brains are so used to hearing and making up stories in past tense. So often when we write in present tense, you'll go back and you'll look at it and you'll realize there's a bunch of past tense verbs that you threw in there because you were just not thinking about it. And then, of course, verbs have to match their subject number. So is it has or have or is or are? And then verbs also need to, if you're doing flashbacks, you want to make sure it's a whole process. So I'm not going to explain it here, but you have to make sure that you're making it clear to the reader when you're moving in and out of a flashback. I keep wanting to go into like great detail for each one of these and then realizing, no, it's not the time. So also make sure you fact check. So are all brand names spelled and capitalized correctly? Are facts and dates around any real life events in your story, are they accurate? Are real people and places spelled and described accurately? So, make sure you spell Barack Obama's name correctly. And then are the clothing, food, technology, societal expectations, etc., all accurate for the time period and the geographic location that your story is set in, if it's, a real set in real life. And you're going to definitely want to ensure consistency. So that just means all proper nouns are spelled the same way every time. You're either capitalizing or not capitalizing a word, same way every time. Are your setting descriptions consistent? Are your characters described consistently? So, that blue-eyed character isn't going to change to brown eyes later in the story. And then for imaginary worlds, even then the laws, rules of the world need to be consistent and like kind of make sense. So if all the white-haired characters in your story can see through walls, and then in a scene there's a white-haired character who's not seeing what's happening on the other side, your reader's going to wonder why. So just have to make sure that then there's either a reason for that, there's some sort of explanation, or you fix it. Reducing repetition is pretty easy to do. It's definitely something you should work on before handing over to a beta reader or an editor. So your sentence structure should be varied in length. And the structure and the length should be varied. And then if you have words or parts of words repeated in a sentence, read that out loud, because sometimes it can sound a little grating to the ear. So you might want to replace one of those words. And action beats, of course, need to be fresh and varied and appropriate for the character in the scene. You don't want to be repeating the same action beats over and over, because that gets old fast. And then we all have our pet words and phrases that we use a lot in our speech and our writing. And when you go to self-edit, you want to make sure you look for those and replace or delete some of them, or most of them. If there's any words you're unsure whether you use them correctly, look those up. If it's a close or deep point of view, filter words should be reduced. So that's things like she saw, they decided, he felt. Because if we're deep in the character's mind, those words kind of pull the reader out and remind them that they're reading a story instead of just being in the story. Oh, and then any unintentional rhyming should be removed. I mean, unless you like it, unless it goes with the flow. And then things like comma splices, expletive constructions, which is just like there is, there was, it is. Those kind of can make sentences sound a little wordy, or sentences usually sound stronger when you've gotten rid of those. Confusing or awkward sentences, You don't want your readers to have to read a sentence twice to understand, because again, pulls them out of the story. And then things like dangling modifiers, which I explain in one of my videos, and I'm going to give you those later. So then you're going to be cleaning your manuscript up, which just means get rid of all the missing spaces, make sure there's no double spaces, check punctuation, get rid of repeated words, inconsistent line spacing, make sure your font is consistent and legible, preferably Times New Roman or something similar, and then that your margins are consistent. So tips for self-editing, I think Eva said this, but take breaks. So the more breaks you take, or the longer of a break you can take, the better, because then you'll be coming at your manuscript with fresh eyes. So that's the reason beta readers and editors are helpful, is because we've never seen your manuscript before, or we've only seen it once or twice. So we're gonna, see things that you can't. And the way to work around that when you're self-editing is just to take breaks. You can keep track of details like character descriptions, proper noun spellings, brand names, all of that you can keep track of in a document called a style sheet. Your copy editor will create one for you, but a lot of authors create pretty much what's similar to a style sheet themselves, especially for characters and settings, just to keep track of all that and make sure it helps you with the whole consistency thing. And before cleanup, when you're doing other self-editing, you can change the font, change the background color, the font color, change the margins. Like Eva said, you could print it out, whatever you can to make it look, again, so that it feels like you're looking at it with fresh eyes. That helps you find things like typos. You just want to then make sure you do the cleanup at the end. And reading aloud your manuscript really helps you find like beautiful sentences that you've written, so you can feel proud of yourself. It helps you find the ugly ones, and it helps you find typos. It helps you find unintentional rhyming. There's so much. I always read aloud a manuscript during the second round of editing, because it's amazing. So don't forget to read it out loud when you're self-editing. And then when you're using tools like MS Word's editor or Grammarly or anything like that, you want to use them with caution, because I would say at least a third of the time their suggestions aren't good or they're not helpful, or they're plain wrong, because they're just still not good enough at knowing like the context of things. And so they often will suggest something or suggest a change that really shouldn't be done. So just be careful. And then like I said, I'm going to send out an email with some links of resources along with my self-editing resource list. It's just got like book titles, my 2 courses, and some other websites that are helpful. And I also have, if you're you are a newsletter subscriber if you're here, and you will get access to Fine Tune Your Fiction Writing, which is just a YouTube playlist, a private YouTube playlist with various videos to help with self-editing. I have 2 courses that are available for purchase. The first one is Character Conversations, and it helps you with improving the dialogue and the action beats in your story. And then the other one is Reduce and Refresh, and it helps you tighten your writing, get rid of repetition, and all that. And all of that can be found at my website. But like I said in the email, everything will be linked. In May, we are going to be speaking in Livermore, California. So we're not putting that info here. It's basically, we're going to be repeating January and February and putting it all into one. But in June, our topic is stress-free ways to process editorial feedback. We're looking for additional topics for Ask an Editor sessions in the future. So if you have any ideas of anything about working with an editor that we haven't yet talked about, please let us know. You can email me. My email's right there. And yeah, I think that's it.